Good evening. Do not be shocked by the scenes coming out of Washington. They're perhaps just the culmination of 4 long years. A leader who made up his own version of the facts has convinced his loyal base they are fighting for the truth. Tonight, at the incitement of Donald Trump, supporters stormed the symbolic heart of American democracy in an attempted coup. Descending on the Capitol building, they tried to contest an election he lost more than 2 months ago. The clashes on the streets and the acts of violence are the product of a people who've been told they were cheated by a man who's always known how to manipulate a mob. But the attempts to change the election result were going on inside Congress too, as a handful of Republican senators sought to challenge the confirmation of Joe Biden. All this as the political landscape shifted. Overnight wins in Georgia's Senate races, handing Democrats control of the upper house. So, a day where divided loyalties have been laid bare, tempers have flared, even the most loquacious have at times been lost for words. In a moment, we'll be live on the streets of Washington. But first, let's hear from President-elect Joe Biden speaking in the last hour. Easy to think, David, that this is just a sort of a mob on the outside, but that attempt to unseat democracy was also going on inside Congress with a handful of Republicans who were trying to overturn the result. Tell us what you heard in those speeches. Because really, it's not about whether you feel something is valid. I mean, surely we've got to get past the emotion of an election result. It's a result. It's the result that the people of America delivered. Why aren't more people in your party saying, get over it? This is not about how you feel.
I wish they would, Emily. I think that's the smart thing to do, and more people.
The Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, has told Parliament he's going to put his trust in teachers rather than algorithms, as he announced assessments would replace GCSE and A-level exams this summer. The bigger question, perhaps, is whether teachers will place their trust in Gavin Williamson after a beleaguered, desperate week for school policy. The government argues it's been pushed into U-turns by a change of events and the new virulent strain of the virus. But teachers have been begging for clarity on closures, home learning, testing capacity and exams for months now, and many have reached the end of their patience. Lewis Goodall looks at how we expect to deliver the education to our young people they deserve. Both for joining us, and we will be back to Washington and David before the end of the programme. But meanwhile, an increasingly dark time for democracy in Hong Kong, which has witnessed the arrest of 53 of its politicians and activists by the Chinese state on trumped-up charges of subversion. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab's accused China of deliberately misleading the world as it passed what it called a security law for Hong Kong last summer, now being used to crush dissent. Chris Patten, the last governor of Hong Kong, has called on the EU to cancel a draft investment deal with China in response. Our international editor, Gabriel Gatehouse, is looking at how the former British territory can respond. Gabriel Gatehouse, and that fight for democracy really has pervaded our stories and the news we brought you this evening. This is a statement just before we go back to David Grossman in Washington. This is from President George W. Bush, and he's called it on insurrection at the Capitol. This is a chance, I think, for a lot of former leaders, or a lot of Republicans certainly, to speak out about what they're seeing. Laura and I, he writes, are watching the scenes of mayhem unfolding at the seat of our nation's government in disbelief and dismay. It's a sickening and heartbreaking sight. This is how election results are disputed, he writes, in a banana republic, not our democratic republic. I'm appalled by the reckless behaviour of some political leaders since the election and by the lack of respect shown. He goes on, but we'll pick up with David Grossman now. And I guess the thing is, David, when the streets are quiet and we know that Washington is now under curfew, the bigger question is what will happen now in terms of how this will be framed. The inauguration of Joe Biden won't happen for another 2 weeks. Do we know what that will entail? Do we know? Pretty much all from us tonight, but we'll be back with plenty more for you then. Thanks for joining us this evening. Have a good night. Bye-bye.